Good morning and welcome to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-3832. That's 855-752-3832. And I want to welcome a change. We've got a new producer of the Earl Ingram Show. I want to welcome aboard Cardi. Hey, good morning to you, Cardi. How you doing, sir? Okay. I'm doing fine, man. Tell us a little bit about Cardi. Um, I was a producer on the Maggie show. They want you to bring me in on the morning show, female with girls. Looking for the video greater. I believe that's a good thing.
It's not
Uh,
right.
Yeah, a lot of communication and getting our voices out there and letting the people know exactly what they need to know. And it's a pleasure to be on the show with you and Sandy.
all right. Sandy, can you hear?
I can now. I could hear before. It was just garbled, but it
Oh,
cleared up.
No.
all right. All right. Well, welcome on board, Cardi, man. We certainly, Calvin's not gone yet. But, I do want to extend a debt of gratitude to Calvin, who did yeoman's work on this show. And, whatever we are and whatever successes we've garnered have certainly come with Calvin sitting in that seat and doing some great things. He's not leaving civic media. He's going to be moving to a different time slot with a different host. And he's still going to be doing the Matinee show, but he's going to be moving down the dial a little bit lower and not having to get up so early. But anyway, we'll talk with Calvin before he gets a chance to get out of here. But welcome on board. Hey, good morning to you, Sandy. How you doing, man?
So we won't have Calvin to kick around anymore?
No, man, we won't have Calvin to kick. Well, where he's going, he'll get enough kicking.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
Anyway, Sandy, we've got a lot to talk about this morning. There's serious, things going on in this nation that you and I are going to have a conversation that I'm sure if it's not being had all over this nation, it certainly should be.
Well, I thought we would step back a bit and sort of at an unemotional level talk about some fundamental things that are fundamental to how our government runs and how our society operates, namely the rule of law. What is that? What does it mean? Why is it important? And talk about it conceptually before we step into the hot stuff of what's going on right now, because obviously what's going on right now is headed well in the direction of testing the rule of law.
But the only thing I would push back on is the emotional aspect of it, because people are emotional because
I think
that are happening in this nation right now.
Oh yeah, I mean that's why I said, but I thought we could step back and talk about it first on the first level, unemotionally. Just what is this rule of law? Why does it matter? Why have we all talked about it? Why do we all abide by it? What is the fundamental importance of it? And then we could move on to getting it to the point of discussing what might be at stake today, which obviously I think leads to a highly emotional conversation.
So, Sandy, before we get to the root of law, why don't you, in your eloquence and knowledge, explain to the American people the three branches of government and how this thing is supposed to work and where the rule of law fits in?
Well, everybody, when they get sworn into office, swears to uphold the Constitution, because the Constitution is the fundamental bedrock of our rule of law. Societies all have to operate with rules because people have to know how to conduct themselves with one another. We have to create standards that create safety. We need speed limits on highways. Everyone understands that because if you're driving through a village, you can't drive 70 miles an hour without endangering people. You have to drive a safe speed. And so the locality decides what's a safe speed for our road. It's 25 miles an hour, it's 30, whatever it is, you abide by it, because if you don't, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to your neighbors, and it's not something that society can tolerate. You can't take things from your neighbor's house because you want it. That would be stealing. There's laws against that kind of thing. So we have the Constitution, which defines our body of law. It defines which part of our government has which authority, and how they relate to one another. So we have Congress, established by our Constitution. Congress is there to establish the laws and to decide what kind of authority they will grant to the executive branch to carry out the laws, which includes authorizing the executive branch to establish rules that would implement the laws. And then you have the courts, and the courts are the ones who decide what power the administrative arm has, the executive arm has, whether these rules were properly implemented, whether someone has violated the laws that were properly implemented, whether a law that someone is alleged to have violated was properly and constitutionally implemented. I mean, this is all the stuff that lawyers go to law school to learn about, but we all learn about in civics class as well. And so, the Constitution ends up being fundamentally important. And then the laws get extended to the states. We have state constitutions. We have authorities granted to the state legislature through the Constitution. We have the state Supreme Court that decides whether laws are implemented constitutionally. We have municipal laws. We understand that if we want to change our municipal laws, we have to go to our alderman or alderperson and persuade them that they need to produce a bill that then gets implemented through the new local municipal laws. So we have this whole system that is set up, and it's been set up to have checks and balances, so that there isn't one organization in our government that rules the day, but rather there's three of them that are watching one another and making sure that one another do the right things. We've got the legislature, which is watched by the courts. We have the executive arm, which has only got the power that's granted to them by the Constitution and the legislature. And it's up to the court to decide and interpret the Constitution and the laws, because these are laws that need to be interpreted, and the court might determine that the law was improperly implemented pursuant to the Constitution, i.e. it's unconstitutional, and therefore can't be implemented as the legislative arm wanted or tried to do. I mean, these are things that have been ongoing in our country since its start, and we've had these norms reflected in the conduct of our government. So we've had laws implemented by Congress. We've had our Supreme Court determine whether they're constitutional or not. We've had the executive arm, which has honored the interpretation of the courts in the past. And so, this experiment, what's been called this great experiment in democracy, has worked because this rule of law, which was established pursuant to the Constitution, has fundamentally been honored by the various arms of the government that were established within the Constitution, and in particular, the executive arm, which is called upon to implement it. So when Brown v. Education was adopted as the law of the land through the Supreme Court's interpretation of constitutional rights to equal education, it was our executive arm that sent the troops into Arkansas and sent the troops into Mississippi to make sure that the law as interpreted by the Supreme Court was actually implemented.
So having said all of those things, Sandy, and you said a mouthful, all of those things are at risk. So now,
they're certainly at risk if norms are not, and here's the problem that we have, and that is that rulings of the court can't only get implemented by the court if the court has the authority of a local police force to implement it, or has at the federal level has the power of the federal marshals. The federal marshals are essentially a police force of the court, but the marshals are not within the judiciary. The marshals are part of the Department of Justice, which is part of the executive arm. So our federal courts have no independent power to implement their orders. And
So,
that's where we have an issue.
so Sandy, on the state level, um, the state legislature can't say, let's send in the National Guard. The governor has to do that.
Yes.
So it does. So and then on up to the higher level with the presidency, the Supreme Court can't say we need you to send in the troops to do this. That's the president has that power.
Yes. Now, locally, and what we're all used to is the enforcement of laws at the state court level. So, if you have a speeding ticket and you violate it, you have a local police force that will take the actions necessary to give your car tickets, to put a boot on your car so you can't drive it. That will enforce the law in the various ways, and ultimately can come and arrest you based on the way the municipal law is set up, with giving the courts the authority through the sheriffs to implement the orders of the court. But we don't have that at the federal level. We have at the federal level a marshal system, and the marshals are dependent on the executive arm for their orders.
So Sandy, so the equal administration of the law. And listen, you're an attorney who graduated from Harvard, and I'm just a blue collar guy. But I would think that if the law is not administered equally across the board, then all the things we're talking about are in jeopardy.
Our system is dependent upon the constitutional prerogatives of the various arms of government being honored within the system, so that when the Supreme Court enters a ruling, our system is dependent upon that ruling being implemented by the executive arm, so that the rulings have effect, and it depends on that being done across the board.
All right, 855-752-4842. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with my co-host Sandy Williams and you on the Earl Ingram Show.
What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Right on. Right on. Right on. Everybody thinks we're at home. Oh, but who are they to judge us? Simply cause our hair is
sorry. I'm usually a huge rule follower. I just look incredibly cute today and I got caught up. Believe me, I know rules are important. I can prove it. Let's go. If we didn't have laws, it would be chaos. Cause laws are the framework for society. They don't just define what counts as a crime. There are laws, no doubt. You have no idea about, like, how we run elections and environment protections and how to start a business and what tax you pay. State and local laws and the Constitution. That's the basis of our laws. All come into play. Let me break it down for you.
All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. 855-752-4842. Cute, Sandy. As always, you can join us at, again, 855-752-4842. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesday. My co-host, Sandy Williams, and you, and we'll get into the music and all of that later. We've got a lot of ground to cover this morning. We're going to have this conversation. You guys can join us, but we kind of want to get into this conversation, the meat of it, because there's some things that are transpiring in this government and that all of us are alarmed about. And, you know, Sandy, there are people looking to upend the government. And so we talk about the government, you talk about the laws and the rules and all of those things, but clearly there are people inside the government who are looking to transform it and upend it.
Well, yeah, I would say this. I sort of wanted to walk before we ran, but, you know, we've had a 70-year period where the Republican Party has tried to become and has essentially successfully, in the people's eyes, become the party of law and order. And they've used this cry for law and order to talk about how important it is in our society that we have law and order and that people be held accountable for their crimes, and that this accountability will be important in terms of making sure that our system works. And we've all gotten used to the notion that that when people do things that are outside the law, first of all, they aren't supposed to act outside the law, but when they do act outside the law will come down on them in a manner that will keep that from happening in the future. Well, they've got that right in a way. That is the way our system is supposed to work. But to date, it's basically been implemented against Tom, Dick, and Mary when they step over the line, when they break a law. And we've developed firmer and firmer, stricter and stricter standards. 3 strikes and you're out. Mandatory sentencing.
Truth in sentencing.
Truth in
no
sentencing.
parole,
All of these things have been set up as the rule of law to be abided by everyone. And now we have a time when we have people in power, and this legal process has become inconvenient to them. It's going to be time-consuming. They're going to have to use processes that might require notices to the public about what they're going to do. It might require hearings for the public to express their view about what it is they want to do. And so they just want to ignore it. And for some things, it seems innocuous. The president has announced that he would like to stop the printing of or the creation, the coinage of any new pennies. Well, Barack Obama talked about ending the coining of pennies, that pennies were sort of superfluous in today's world. But there's a process for that. Congress is in charge of our currency, and it would be up to Congress to decide not to issue new pennies. And so if it's an obvious thing to do, then let's get Congress doing it. And it shouldn't take a long time for Congress to enact something as simple as getting rid of pennies. But what we shouldn't do is have a president who simply dispenses with the process and decides to get rid of pennies. I mean, what will he decide to get rid of next? That's always been the way we learn in law school. It's like, okay, well, it might be okay here, but let's take the logical extreme about what that means. If the president can ignore this rule, can he ignore all rules? Is he free to decide which rules he can ignore and which ones he needn't follow and which ones he must follow? I mean, this is the nature of the rule of law. You don't let people independently decide what are the good laws. It's like jaywalking, okay? Can you simply walk where you want to on the street, or must you cross at the intersection?
Sandy, um, what you guys learned in law school, the letter of the law, um, and the inner workings of it. But we, the average citizens, don't know the inner workings of law. What we know is that we are to abide by it. And so if we don't abide by it, there's a penalty that we pay. And it may be that simplistic for the average American because there's a penalty that will be meted out against us if we don't follow it. And so when we get into all the intricacies of it, it's really above our pay grades. It's we just know that we've always been taught to follow the law, because if we don't follow the law, our nation as we know it is at risk.
Well, and fundamental to that is we are not entitled, each one of us, to decide which laws we're going to follow and which ones we aren't, because obviously that is chaos. Because I might decide, make some good decisions and decide that, well, the only law I'm going to violate is the jaywalking law, and I'm going to violate it when there are no cars in mind. Well, actually, the jaywalking law is written in such a manner that probably that's permissible. But we can't each be left to choose which laws we follow and which ones we don't, because in that case, there are no laws, because some people will choose to violate any and all laws. And so that's the case with every person and every law. And we have to face up to the fact that we have to ask ourselves whether governors or presidents are entitled to choose which laws they're going to follow.
So some of us would think in simplistic terms, what's good for the gander is good for the goose as it relates to law. And it's supposed to be blind.
That's the way it's supposed to work. We're all supposed to be gooses and ganders.
855-752-4842. It's Tuesday with my co-host Sandy Williams. We got a lot to cover, and we're going to certainly bring you guys in, but we got a lot to talk about. Our nation and what we know about it is in jeopardy on the Earl Ingram Show.
Constitution sets up our democracy, yeah. And since the laws are made by those we elect, we know the law should reflect what we the people want for society. We get to vote who goes to Congress. That's the group whose job is making laws for the whole U.S. of A. And along with those laws, states make their own laws. So do counties, even towns. And if you don't
This show had 24 seasons, so most people know what it is.
All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. That's 855-752-4842. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays. My co-host Sandy Williams will get into the music a little bit later on and why. You know, Sandy, you're explaining, you know, the law. And it's in simplest terms. It's very complex. If it wasn't complex, you wouldn't walk into a lawyer's office and see all those books that have been.
Yeah, those are all hollow. You know, they're just
well,
they're just there for show.
Well, so it's so complex, but in the simplest terms that we can understand. The average citizen, we see things that are happening. And I can tell you that in my lifespan, I'm watching things happen that have never happened before in my life that I can recall. And they're moving at the speed of light. And every day, I'm seeing confusion with how the government works and who's in charge of it. And so, you know, the good and the bad, this is what we're faced with. And so many of us would probably think, Sandy, that the law would be more definitive than it is.
Well, I think it is quite definitive, actually. But I think the problem is that what I'm talking about is the notion that process matters, that how you do things are almost as important, and maybe in the long run more important than what you do. Our Constitution is entirely dependent on process. Our local laws and our state constitution are entirely dependent upon processes being followed. And those processes are designed to protect the public interest and to make sure that the public's interest is not negatively affected by what goes on, that the public has the opportunity to involve itself in what happens, and that there is transparency so that we can see what's happening. And you know, whether our government has operated perfectly in the past, you know, the process has been mired. Okay, we haven't had a lot of activity. We haven't accomplished a lot. There's a fair amount of frustration out there amongst the people about the lack of fundamental activity in Washington being responsive to what it is they want and need. Yes, but now we have in place a group of people who apparently are announcing to the public that process be damned, they're going to go out and accomplish what it is they think the public voted them into office to do. And a lot of that is based on some intuition. A lot of that is based on their belief that they can do whatever they want because they've realized a so-called mandate from the public to do what it is they might have been talking about during the campaign. But process is what is fundamentally important to preserving society. And to the extent that what they choose to do, whether it's correct or not, in terms of public policy, if they do it contrary to policy, contrary to proper procedure, they will tear down our society and create a society that doesn't work. They will destroy the American experiment. And that's the fear I've got. You know, much of what DOJ is doing might well be, some of it might well be appropriate if they were using proper process, if they were handling regulations and abiding by them and modifying regulations as regulations are supposed to be modified and following process, then what they're doing is fine. We did elect someone to do things according to process and to change things according to procedures. But we did not elect someone to office to exercise complete discretion and to ignore inconvenient laws or inconvenient regulations, because that process will destroy the American experiment.
So, Sandy, you said process is at the root of all of it. And yet we're watching people say process be damned. And so once, as you stated, you do away with process, you basically dismantle what the government, the Constitution, and all those things mean.
Yes.
So we're at a critical juncture already. I mean, we're not talking 6 months from now, a year from now. We're at a point right now where it can be lost in the twinkling of an eye if certain things aren't rectified. Is it safe to say that?
Well, if certain, for instance, we have a vice president who's talking about the possibility of the executive arm defying court
Doesn't
orders.
have to, yeah, right.
So that is the crisis I'm talking about. And the fact is that we have to look at two different things. What is being done, whether it's good public policy or not, but the second thing is how it's being done. And how it's being done is of equal importance to what it is that's being done. And I'm afraid that the current administration has decided that what is being done is the only thing that's important, and how it's done is a matter of convenience, and that swashbuckling and ignoring the law is in a swashbuckling manner is actually the new form of government that they want to implement. And that's the critical issue. That's the thing that will destroy the American experiment, because this person's good policy is that person's critical problem.
So if they're allowed to continue down this path, can Congress stop them?
Well, Congress can only attempt to stop them. The problem is the executive is the one that implements laws. And so according to the Constitution, the constraint on executive conduct is the court, and ultimately the Supreme Court. But you don't get directly to the Supreme Court. You get to the Supreme Court through the lower courts. And the executive is not entitled to defy lower court orders. What they are entitled to do is appeal the lower court order to the Supreme Court and to use the judicial process to try and stay the action of the lower court or follow the legal procedures that are appropriate within the judicial process for dealing with the judicial contest over the executive's powers. And that's the way the system needs to work. And if it doesn't work that way, it will break.
So, Sandy, as solely a lowly rank and file American citizen, and we're watching all of this transpire before our eyes, and it's just like the things that Donald Trump wanted to do and that the judicial system tried to put brakes on, and now he's ignoring many of those things, and they're going to move forward in many instances because the judicial system can't stop him. Then the only thing that the American people can do is take to the streets.
Well,
if they get frustrated enough, the only way possible to put a stop to this is the American people mobilizing, organizing, and taking to the streets.
I mean, we've laughed about so-called banana republics, but if our elected executive decides to defy the courts, we have at that point become a banana republic. And there are only a couple of mechanisms that can defy and can control the executive who has decided to defy the law as defined by the judicial system. And those are the military. And what's happened in most countries is you end up ultimately with a military takeover where the military decides to defy its commander-in-chief and to take over the government and to reinstall the order of law, or revolution, people in the streets. But I mean, that's why I say that if the executive decides that he can pick and choose what laws to follow, our experiment is over. And the American democracy as we know it is cooked. And it's a big problem, a very big problem. And what I'm most concerned about is that we have people on the sideline right now cheering the conduct of our government, cheering the notion that they will defy the law that is inconvenient and gets in their way so that they can accomplish the ends that they've announced they want to accomplish.
Hey, Sandy, the executive has decided that he
Well,
can ignore the government.
Well, I think it's not clear yet. I think that they've said
Well,
they might. I think that this one order of the Delaware federal court that involves the injunction of the restraint on assistance and grants is up. The question of whether that's being defied is currently up in the air. I don't want to get ahead of the facts, ahead of our skis, but it's clear that this executive is headed in that direction based on the things they're saying.
Let's do this, Sandy. Let's bring a caller in. Let's go to Gary from Sussex. Good morning to you, Gary. You say what?
Well, you guys have been in charge for out of the last 16 years, 12 years.
Hey, Gary. Who is you guys? We're talking about the wait a minute.
Well,
we're talking about the government of this nation that is in jeopardy of being torn asunder, and it's not about you guys and those guys.
Well, actually, what I was trying to do with this conversation, Gary, is not talk about it from the standpoint of currently what's going on, but talk about the rule of law, why it's important, and have us. I presume you agree that people can't pick and choose what laws they're going to follow, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Absolutely.
and you agree, don't you, that court orders need to be followed, and that the process for testing a court order is appealing the court order and abiding by what it is the court orders, right?
Donald Trump can only do what the government and the laws allow him to do.
Okay, all right. I'm fine with that. If Donald Trump and the current administration wants to implement laws that are consistent with their ideological bent, and if they succeed in doing it, that's okay. That's the American system. That's the vote of our Congress. That's the process of our government. And so I'm saying that's fine. I'm simply saying that how you do things are as important as what you do. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then we don't have anything talked about, because I'm not arguing with the notion that the Republicans are free to implement laws that they can accomplish during this administration. I'm concerned about a process that might be utilized that would be outside the law.
So let me ask you. Go ahead, Sandy.
Well, and so my issue is, for instance, what Doge is doing now. And I don't know whether they're abiding by the laws, but it appears that they are running roughshod through the regulations of our government and doing it at a rate that will be very hard for the courts to keep up with.
Well, Sandy, I will say to you that there are many attorneys and many judges who do believe they're doing something that's outside the law. And so, whether it's in question or not, there are many people pushing back and saying that what they're doing now is not in line with the law as they know it.
Well, Gary, I think you should stay on the line if we have a break coming, because I think we should talk about whether there is a danger then that you perceive that would be created by operating outside the law, even if what's being accomplished is something that you're eager to have accomplished.
855-752-4842. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesday is my co-host Sandy Williams and you on the Earl Ingram Show. welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842, 855-752-4842. You can text us at that same number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesday is my co-host, Sandy Williams, and we're talking about just where we are at this time in the history of this nation. And Sandy, I just want to say this before we go back to Gary. To be honest with you, man, I'm not interested in people who see this from the perspective of what I see Republicans doing right now, doing things that are clearly in opposition to what the laws of this land stands for, and the fact that there are people who are watching the dismantling of the government before their eyes, and we want to somehow listen to why these people feel the way they feel. They're causing, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're pushing against the norms of what this government has stood for.
Well,
And
no,
so-
I maybe. I mean, that's why I wanted Gary to stay on, because I think I just wanted to have the conversation with someone who is a ardent conservative about the notion that what's going on could be dangerous, even if what they're seeing is something that they think ought to happen in
He doesn't
terms of
see
the
it as
policies.
dangerous.
Well, let's see, because, I think that what we need to do is step back a ways and say, okay, I've been frustrated. Gary recited a history that wasn't accurate. He said the Democrats have been in charge for the last 16 years. First of all, that isn't true. The Republicans had the president in the White House for 4 of those years, and they controlled Congress for many more of those years. And so, we have a system in place. And there are people who are frustrated about the system not having been responsive to what they want to have happen. But I'm simply trying with this conversation to highlight for people and put into their mind the fact that how things happen can be just as important as what it is that happens, because today's sauce for the goose might not feel so good on the gander. So, when we have Republicans in charge doing things willy-nilly and potentially ignoring the law and ignoring court orders, those who are Republican might be satisfied with that experience, but how will they feel when the tide has turned and it is a Democrat in charge and it is Democratic policies that are being implemented contrary to the law?
Well, Sandy, I'll say this. I don't see them feeling any way because, as I stated to you earlier, I don't see them doing this just for 4 years. I see them setting this in motion for rule, long-term rule. And so I don't see all the different things that they're doing right now just for 4 years of Donald Trump. They are looking to control the government of this nation.
Well, let Gary. So Gary, it sort of to further the conversation, if a court orders the government to do something, how will you feel if the current administration says they're going to defy the order and they order the federal marshals to stand down and to not enforce the order that is the order of the federal court? How would you feel about that circumstance?
I wouldn't like that at all. If they have a stay, if some federal judge goes out there and says he's going to put a stay on this executive order that he said, well, fine, then you fight it in the courts. He's doing so many, what has it been, over almost 500 executive orders that he signed in the last, 3 weeks or something? And to correct you, Sandy, I said out of the last 16 years, that you guys have been in charge of 12. I know that Donald Trump was president 4 years
Okay,
ago.
Gary. So
no.
point, hold on, Sandy. Because so the point is, what are you saying, Gary? What is it you want the people to hear from the perspective of Republicans with what's taking place right now?
Donald Trump and 53% of the people in the United States see the mandate that Donald Trump is. And what he has is he wants to go back to what it used to be. The Democrats have gone so far to the left.
All right. Thank you very much for the
Democrats-
call. Thank you very much for the call. Come on, Sandy.
Well, I mean, I think the only way I think we're going to reach an understanding on the right about process is to talk to them about how important it is that whatever it is they want to accomplish. I mean, whether I can persuade Gary about what policies he wants to have accomplished, I think we can reach an agreement on the procedures that need to be followed to accomplish those objectives. And that's where the experiment in democracy can reach its end. If these policies that the right want to accomplish are accomplished through the procedures set up by the Constitution, at least our Constitution is intact, our processes are intact, and quite frankly, it will be a more difficult procedure for them to accomplish all that they want to accomplish if they do it according to appropriate
Sandy,
process.
I'm hearing Chuck Schumer and others ask for the exact same thing you are asking for, and they're saying that they're not even being heard.
Well, that's why I'm hoping that we can have a sort of this non-emotional conversation, reaching out to those on the right to have them at least recognize that process is vitally important, and that their frustration with the system should not cause them to be encouraging a process that will destroy the American democracy.
Come on,
And
Sandy.
and it's not that difficult to destroy.
Text. Come on, a text message. Come on, Sandy. All they do is giving talking points. I know you want to have an honest conversation, but you need to have an honest broker on the table in order to have an honest conversation. 855-752-4842. That's a text message. We'll continue the conversation on the other side. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesday. My co-host Sandy Williams and you on the Earl Ingram Show.
sure got to climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee. But I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea.
You know,
some
Sandy,
folks back
that
home
should be
decided they wanted a
mandatory
law passed, so they called that local
for children
congressman
to
and he
hear.
said,
Well, this is a children. This is
I know. I know what
Nickelodeon, and this one is from another children's show. I just wanted to demonstrate that, you know, we teach our children all about this, about the rule of law, about how it works. We go to civics class. All of this is fundamental to society, and it's been so fundamental that it's embodied in all these kinds of animated learning processes, as well as in our music generally.
Hey, Sandy,
Yeah.
we don't do that anymore. I remember when they did that, and when that came out, and the impact that that had on children, it worked. I mean, that's not what they're doing today. They should go back to that. It's clear. It was animated. And so young people could learn it more and in a fun way than the mundane way of a teacher sitting down in a classroom teaching it. So 855-752-4842 is Tuesday, and we'll talk about the music in a few minutes. My co-host Sandy Williams. Sandy, we got a lot of text messages. Tony says Republican voters are taking their lead from Trump. He has not reached out in any way to get Democratic support for any of his policies. And so I guess what they're saying is you want to have these conversations with the people on the other side. I'm all for having those conversations, but on the high levels of government, Sandy, they aren't willing to have it.
Well, maybe there's a common ground, which is process. That's why I decided this might be a good subject to talk about today. Process is something we can agree upon, I think.
They're not agreeing upon
constitutional process. And so, well, if the public would agree upon it, then we could possibly put some brakes on a process that's ongoing in Washington that seems to be headed in the direction of creating a new and different process that's autocratic, you know, that's one in which we give all the power to a man and allow that a man or that person in power to pick and choose the laws that they decide to follow, the laws they decide to implement. You know, the impounding of money that has been authorized by Congress is essentially the reverse of taxation without representation. Taxation without representation is what drove us to the revolution. You know, it was a process. We were willing to be taxed as the colonies so long as we could vote upon it. But if we couldn't vote upon it, then we revolted. And if we voted on it and decided to spend it as a people, then if the president decides to impound it, he's done essentially the same thing. It's the same crime.
Hey, Sandy, the people have always agreed with process. That's why it hasn't been a problem up until now. The people who are choosing not to agree with process happen to be the Republicans. Go ahead.
Well, my hope is it's not all the Republicans, and the people who care about our process and our Constitution will decide that process trumps policy from the standpoint of how policy is to be implemented.
Let's go to Brendan from New Jersey. Brendan, thank you very much. You say what? Brendan, are you there? We'll come. Brendan, are you there? Brendan, only because you've been waiting so long.
Hey, Brendan.
Okay. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead, Brendan.
Listen, thank you, Earl. Listen, everybody, stop watching the zone be flooded. Okay, the man just said last night he's now got his plan in place to move those Palestinians because he's threatening to end a ceasefire in Palestine if we don't get the rest of the people back, okay? And the end of the guardrail, the paper guardrail that's standing right now between us and a dictatorship, is him ignoring the orders of a federal judge by telling the DOJ federal marshals, do not enforce anything the federal judge says. Once he does that, okay, you got Hegseth running the military. He said full disclosure to the Senate, but the first thing he did was turn around, take 3 legitimate news sources, kick them out of the press room, and bring in Breitbart, OAN, and Newsmax. They're setting up state TV. This is all going very smoothly, folks, and all our Republican friends are just sitting back watching it happen, and they're still so angry about Obama and a black female trying to run for president. He's taken the racism of this country. He's taken the hatred for people that aren't white, that are brown, and he's used it against us. And he's going to try to take over this country. Elon Saturday was in Germany flipping high Hitler signs to the right party of Germany. The real egg in this whole mixture of cake is Elon Musk, and he is trying to take over any country that will take his money and where he can buy politicians. Everybody needs to wake up.
Hey, Brendan, thank you.
And the
Thank you.
tipping point will be when they come for your guns.
Thank you very much for the call, man. I wish you had more time. Sandy, you want to respond to anything Brendan had to say?
Well, no, I mean, I feel the same sense of alarm, but in order to try and appeal to people's thought process, I'm trying to get us to talk about this from the standpoint of process. And Brendan's dead on. We are at the brink of potentially a president, an executive, telling the marshals to defy the courts and to stand down. And if that happens, we've jumped the rail.
All right, let's go to Dave from Mequon. Good morning to you, Dave. You say what? Dave, are you there?
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So really quickly, I look at what's going on now, and basically Sandy is saying we got to look at the process. The process has been twisted and turned now for decades. And what I mean by that is, unfortunately, we have a lot of Americans on both sides of the aisle that have suffered severe consequences with not feeling that they don't have any say with anything. And what I mean by that is, it's sort of like when you build a home, when you do different things, there's so many different things, so many different institutions of government that's involved with our daily lives.
Hey Dave, try to focus. We don't have a lot of time, Dave, so try to focus on the conversation.
Well, here's my question, Dave. You're saying that people are frustrated. That was my point earlier. I think people are frustrated with the fact that government has not been very actively responsive through the process. Our government's been paralyzed ever since paralysis of government was the strategy of Newt Gingrich, and ever since then we've had this paralysis. But are you suggesting that the paralysis of government is a reason for now ignoring the processes implemented under our Constitution and allowing someone to be in power and ignore process in order to implement policy? That's a direct question.
Well, so would you have a judge that's ordering?
Just answer the question, or I want to understand, because it isn't a matter of talking about particular specifics. If a judge issues an order, is the government entitled to ignore it, or is the government required to follow the judicial processes set forth in our Constitution to try to upset that judicial order?
They're supposed to follow the order.
Yeah.
However, let me finish, Sandy. They're supposed to follow the order. However, what we've seen time and time again in the past, the last few decades, we see the DOJ and other things where people want to defend their land and other things, and then the federal government says, nope, you can't do that. You know,
My
this is,
my
David,
goodness, Dave,
Thank you very much for the call.
you're just
So-
not focusing on the issue, Dave, and you're trying to arm wave about frustrations to justify a process, and that's the danger we're in right now. Okay,
So-
you represent the danger that I described, because justifying upsetting the process by frustrations about policy is the very danger we face.
So, Sandy, this is why when we want to have this conversation with people on the right who say they're frustrated with the way government has been run, and so they want to upend it, they're not the only ones who are frustrated with the way government has been run. And so they're not the only ones entitled to say that it hasn't been run properly for us. It's all of us. But we're at a point where we're listening to one side of this who have said it hasn't worked the way we wanted it. So we're going to demand and we're going to change all of that's my issue. We're listening to one side of it.
Well, what you're listening to is a side of it that thinks they've grabbed control of the reins, number
Well, that's-
one. And number two, they think that they've grabbed control of the reins and only will have it for a limited period of 2 years, because they think this democratic process will probably take the reins away from them after 2 years. And so they are attempting to accomplish, outside of the bounds of process, all the things that they want to accomplish. And if this had happened in reverse, I think that the minority communities in this country have for long thought that the law was not being implemented foursquare in the manner that they hoped it would be implemented.
Sandy, but nobody listened.
Nobody listened.
Nobody listened.
And however, when a black man was elected president, what they saw was not this kind of upset of process. Barack Obama did not attempt to implement laws outside the boundaries. And our processes and constitutional processes continued.
Sandy, the voters don't care about process, but it is important that the people in power care about the process. You won't change hearts and minds with process.
Well, that's very concerning to me, because the American public has its entire stake in the Constitution and the implementation of the Constitution. And if we destroy the Constitution, people want to talk about it, and the right who want to talk about it so very much are the ones now who want to throw it in the trash bin.
All right, 855-752-4842. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesday. My co-host Sandy Williams, and a riveting conversation. We're going to continue it. Hang on the phone lines.
And pray that they will, but today I am still just a bill.
Listen to those congressmen arguing. Is all that discussion and debate about you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. Most bills never even get this far. I hope they decide to report on me favorably, otherwise I may die.
Die?
Yeah, die in committee. Oh, but it looks like I'm going to live. Now I go to the House of Representatives and they...
I will never be as cute as you, according to the board of human relations. I will never fly as high as you, according to the board of public citations. These are just the rules and regulations of the birds and the bears.
All right, welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. 855-752-4842. Text us at the same number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays for Sandy Williams. Sandy, we got a truckload of text messages and the phone lines full. Let's go. We'll talk about the music at the next break. Let's go to Tom from LA. Good morning to you, Tom. You say what?
Yeah, first, Sandy, we from the Reagan generation actually never had civics. Just to let you know, he actually destroyed civics in the public schools and also in the private schools, because I went to a private school. We did not have civics. The difference between Republicans and Democrats, Republicans hate we the people government and want to destroy it until they have a dictator. Democrats may have issues with the government, but they always are trying to strive to make it better for we the people. And I think that that's at the crux of where we're at, because the honest truth is, if you don't like something, you're going to tear it down. Government, we the people government does not work when Republicans run it. It's just the bottom line. They have, they want to get through all this regulation and all this stuff. There's a reason. There is a process in government. And I think one thing the Democrats could do, because Barack Obama and other people grew up during the Reagan era as well, and apparently bought into the fact that government bad, government bad, government bad. Believe me, there's a lot in the private sector that is bad, but all we do with the private sector is put that up on a pedestal, and we say how crappy government is. We need to start pushing back and say we the people are government, and government is good. And this is what it actually gives us. And hopefully with Donald Trump tearing down we the people government, hopefully people will start to see the good that government has done and actually come up with a slogan that make government great again. Make we the people government great again. Thank you.
Hey, Tom, thank you very much for the call. Let's go to Gene from Eau Claire. Good morning to you, Gene. You say what?
Oh, standing there with Tom from LA. Great job. Yeah, I've been watching our government live for years. And yeah, they went back and forth, but they debated. And they made, they'd compromise and they'd see what should be in a bill. And also, all of our agencies, all of those people that go to work every day in all the different offices work to make our government better. It is our government. It is our protection, Homeland Security, also all the different protections, and also our streets and roads and all the things in school. The thing that drives me bananas, having worked in the schools, having tested kids and getting rid of the Department of Education. That is ludicrous. People move all over the state. If the schools aren't somewhat uniform, those kids, they're going to be hurting really bad. I mean, I cannot believe it. I've watched, for years now, this government under the DT, those people, a lot of there were good Republicans fighting back in the past, but guess what? Right now, all they do is run people down and fight, and it's really bad. Take a look, guys. Watch
Hey,
them
Gene,
live.
thank you very much for the call. Hey, Sandy, we've attempted the experiment that you and I talked about, having a conversation with conservatives. We had several who call in. They weren't even willing to have the discussion. Okay. And so.
Well, let me say this. I don't think that they weren't willing to have it. I think that what they wanted to do was deflect and to ignore the proposition of what's going on and to suggest that, yes, they believed in adhering to process, but, okay? And you can't say that you believe in adhering to process, but there is no but. There is process, and it must be followed for our Constitution to survive.
Sandy, I heard them say, well, you guys have been in charge all these years, and that's not willing to have a frank discussion. That is what we're hearing from one side of the ledger, not just with our callers in this experiment, Sandy, but all the programs that I'm watching and hearing, even from Republicans all the way up to the top, saying the same thing. They're not willing to have the conversation.
Well, my fear is that this assault on the deep state, this notion that our government, the bureaucrats of our government are the enemy, doesn't just include the executive branch of government, but it also includes the courts. And there has been a direct assault on the integrity of the courts, and the notion that the courts, if are infected by liberals, and that it's therefore a notion that you can ignore these decisions of these courts because they are essentially an extension of the deep state. That whole kind of thinking is the end of our democracy.
So, Sandy, where do you go from there? Because that is part of the thinking that's entrenched right now in the minds of far too many people, not all, but far too many who call themselves Republicans.
Well, I just think we need to get back to civics and start talking about the importance of our process and our system and the constitutional form of government. Republicans want to wrap themselves in the Constitution, but they're going to be naked if they throw it away.
All right, 855-752-4842, 855-752-4842. And Sandy, I do think it's safe to say that our nation is soon will be weighed in the balance if we don't fix this. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesday's my co-host Sandy Williams and you on the Earl Ingram Show.
These are just the rules and regulations of the birds and the bears.
I got your prompt up. Give me 1 second.
Coming up next.
1 second.
Okay.
All right, ready? Go.
You got to get that thing out of the way.
I want that. Go ahead.
Coming up next. Red, let's do it again.
Go ahead.
Coming up on the next show, we'll talk with Flack and the campaign for lead-free water before discussing immigration in the city of Milwaukee with Mayor Cavalier Johnson and getting organized with Dr. Robert Craig.
Good.
All right.
stitch and then she walked away. Independence would daydream and he'd pretend that someday him and just the nation be together again. But just held up in shotgun shack, wouldn't let nobody in. So the nation cried.
All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. Text us at that same number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesday is my co-host, Sandy Williams. And you, Sandy, the music has been outstanding. What's behind it?
Well, it was this whole question of following the rule of law. I started out with some civics lessons from Nickelodeon and some of the other things that our children watch, and then just music that reflects it. The Rufus Wainwright thing about was kind of a tongue-in-cheek rules and regulations. But, what we're talking about today is fundamental to the American system, which is simply process, not what we're doing in terms of policy, but how we're doing it and how we as the American people are abiding by laws and passing laws that reflect the will of the American people.
So if you're just joining us, at the root of our conversation this morning has been about the rule of law and where we're headed. So let's go back to the phone lines, and Mike from Kenosha. Good morning to you, Mike. You say what?
Good morning, guys. Thanks for taking my call, as always. I was looking into presidential orders, executive orders, and until this administration came into power, the record was 42 executive orders in the first 100 days. So now we have a sitting president who has done somewhere around 500 of these executive orders that it is absolutely impossible to vet, impossible to investigate, impossible to then report back to the people what exactly, is the game plan. The whole process has been turned on its side here. The Supreme Court process of selecting judges, they manipulated that. They're denying millions of people the access to vote, the things like interstate cross-check and all these other exclusionary things to deny people their ballot. It's difficult to get your mind wrapped around these things. Civil service professionals, that's an efficient way to run public office, bringing in people from the outside that really don't have the experience. That's not good business. That's not efficient. So the last thing I want to say is, here we have this party that have denied our election outcomes when all science, all reports say it was a good election. They've, continued this huge onslaught of just attack on every issue. I'm done with these guys. As far as I'm concerned, the Republican Party has been captured. It's not the Republican Party that my parents were happy with and participated in. It has nothing to do. This is a takeover. Like you said in the last hour, Earl. They are taking over the government. They are dismissing the Constitution and the power of we the people. And if we don't wake up from the stupor that we're in, it's going to be too late.
Hey,
we
Mike.
don't have much time.
Hey,
Yes.
Mike, what your thoughts about Sandy saying we've got to work hard to have conversation and dialogue with these people? Your thoughts?
Well, that's the first step, but they have to want to have that dialogue back and forth. Dialogue is not a one-way street. And what I've seen and what I've witnessed, and I've certainly heard today and in other days on your show, is the other side here, these anarchists. They don't. They deflect. They won't take on the conversation. They won't. They just refuse to.
Sandy, you want to respond?
Well, here's my theory, which is these people ought to be scared by what I'm talking about. this is, they have operated, the Republicans and the right, in the name of Republicans, have for quite a while now decided to instill fear
Hey,
in the American.
Mike, you got to turn your radio down. Mike,
It is all the way down.
Okay, go ahead, Sandy.
Have decided to instill fear into the American people as a way of driving them into a corner and getting them to abandon reason. Well, here's something to be afraid of. A dictator, a person who takes power and ignores laws and chooses which laws to abide by and which laws not to abide by, who decides to seize the military and to use the military for domestic purposes. If this was a Democrat doing these things, these Republicans would realize that it's something to be afraid of. And so my point is, process is a nonpartisan issue. Process is something that protects the partisans on both sides of the aisle from abuse by the partisan on the other side of the aisle. And what we've got now in place is a party in power that's looking like they're attempting to use to ignore process for the purpose of having the ends justify the means.
All right, let's go to line 6 and Cassandra. Line 6 and Cassandra. Good morning, Cassandra. You say what?
Earl and Sandy, thanks for taking my call. And I'm watching you all on YouTube, and I see Cardi, the new producer, and I just wanted to say welcome. It's nice to see a young new face on the set.
Thank you. Appreciate that, by the way.
Yeah. I voted for Trump, and I am not a MAGA person. And I just want you all to know that those of us who did vote for Trump and who were members of the Democratic Party for a number of years, we did so because we just did not feel the party was listening to us. And one caller said, we can't have a conversation with people who voted for Trump. That's not true. I'm sitting here, I'm listening to all of your concerns. And Sandy, I agree about the part that the Republican Party, what they're doing is very, very dangerous. I believe that we cannot have any party disregard or ignore court orders. The court has to be respected. There is a mechanism in place to stop all of this, and that is the Congress and Senate. And so there should be a real push to get the Republican Congress and Senate to uphold their constitutional duty, which is to put a check on the president. And as I said before, this blanket statement that we are not listening, those who voted for Trump, that's not true. We are. So you have to find a way of communicating a little bit better to us.
So let me ask you, Cassandra, if you had to do all over again today, watching what is taking place, would you still vote for Donald Trump?
I would, Earl, and you've asked me that before. Here's the issue, something, Earl, that I want you to please consider. Everyone is very critical of Elon Musk. Elon Musk,
and rightfully so.
He did not come onto the scene, instantly. He was groomed by none other than Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi.
Hey, Cassandra. But you can say that, but Nancy Pelosi was not in a position to give him the power to do what he's doing. Donald Trump did. So it really doesn't matter.
Oh.
Well, Cassandra, you are saying that he was groomed by Nancy Pelosi. When the Democrats were in charge, they didn't give him entree into our government. How can you say that she's the reason that Elon Musk is doing what he's doing?
Well, let me intervene here for a minute, because I think that the problem with arguing like that, Cassandra, about what somebody else did is begs the question of process. Process it disregards all of that, and process is just the procedure that's set in place. And incidentally, the process we have doesn't really include Congress constraining the executive actions of the president. That's solely up to the courts. And only the courts can decide that a president is acting unilaterally outside the law. And so if Congress enacts laws that the president decides to ignore, the only channel to protect against that is the courts. And so what we have here is this fragile system that does not depend on, yeah, but. There are no yeah, but arguments associated with process. Process is rigid, and process has to be followed. And if the process isn't followed, our system breaks.
Cassandra, you can respond.
If the process rigid, Sandy, then what is the argument? Then it means it's permanent and cannot be changed.
Oh,
No
the process can be changed. The process can be changed by Congress, but the president has to honor whatever process is put in place. And what we're talking about is a president or an executive that decides to ignore the processes that are put in place. And if a president can ignore a law that's already executed, that's already been passed by a past Congress, he can also ignore a law that's passed by the existing Congress. So my point is that as far as checks and balances on the conduct of the president is concerned, there's only one path, and that's the courts.
Okay, Sandy, all I'm saying here is just to keep more of an open mind. Not all of us who voted for Trump.
I have that open mind. I have it. I'm simply saying that process is exceedingly important, and maybe we can have a meeting of the minds. As you indicated in your call, you agreed with the whole process issue.
Hey, Cassandra, I will say to you that as you ask Democrats to have an open mind on the people who voted for Donald Trump, I would ask those people who voted for Donald Trump to have an open mind themselves. And the more I hear from those people who voted for Donald Trump, there are less and less Cassandras in that group. Thank you very much for the call. Let's go to line 2. No. Let's go to Mary from Tulsa. Good morning to you, Mary. You say what?
Good morning, Earl and Sandy. So my simplistic or basic thought on what's going on is that parties that operate by their immoral beliefs and actions don't respect laws, and they act accordingly to accomplish their means. What do you think?
Yeah, Sandy, I think she's absolutely correct. But Sandy, you know.
No, that is my point. I think by talking about the process that needs to be honored in order to maintain our Constitution in place, we can identify those who might be acting contrary to it. And in my mind, at least, it's most recently been the conservative wing of the Republican Party, who wraps themselves in a Constitution which they are determined to ignore.
All right, 855-752-4842 is the phone number. A heated conversation this morning, and a really informative conversation as always with my co-host Sandy Williams and you on the Earl Ingram Show. One more segment.
Got yourself a big reputation. Couldn't keep the boy at home, no. He just kept running round and around and around and around. Independence and justice, well, felt so ashamed. When the nation fell down, they argued who is to blame. When the nation didn't just come on, we'll have this family again. No nation, don't cry. Oh, when the nation cries, its tears fall down like missiles from the sky. Justice will get you in the independence inside. Can you make everything all right? Can you keep your nation warm tonight?
you are on the road must have a code that you can live by, and so become yourself, because the past is just a goodbye. Teach your children well, their father's hell.
All right, welcome back to what is the last few minutes of the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. It's been a rousing conversation with my co-host, Sandy Williams. Let's go right back to the phone lines and Jack from Merrimack. Good morning to you, Jack. You say what?
Good morning. Well, Musk, yeah. Unelected. No confirmation hearing. Appointed to a job that's not in the Constitution, not in any law, and not in any regulation. No security clearance. No vetting whatsoever, aside from the fact that he gave $250 million to Trump's campaign. Citizen of 3 countries. I wonder how our patriots think about that. And no known allegiance to any. Unilaterally gifted, by the way, with this position. These patriots who think this is just fine and wrap themselves in the flag and the Constitution, how about you start following the Constitution instead of posting love it or leave it memes, much like the McCarthy era of the 50s or the Vietnam era of the 70s. I've lived through both, by the way. So let Congress create such a job. Oh, wait a minute. I thought they already had. It's called inspectors general, most of whom were fired. Once there's an actual dodgy job, then nominate whoever you want for its head. Make sure he can pass a security check, preferably is only a U.S. citizen, not a citizen of a bunch of countries, so you know where the loyalty really lies. Make sure the nominee has a confirmation hearing, so both conservative and progressives can ask questions that explore the qualifications and conflicts of interest. Have a roll call vote so we know who decided, this guy is what we really want. You don't just say, you're the guy for this job because I know you and you gave me $260 million in campaign funds. I mean, that's essentially what it is. That's what we've got now.
You know what,
it's
Jack?
Pretty disgusting.
Jack,
talk about process.
Jack, your problem is you understand democracy. Sandy, you want to respond to what Jack is saying?
Well, no, that was my point in terms of teeing the subject up, is to try and inspect what's going on as compared to the process that's required. I mean, it's alarming. We have a president who's pardoning Blagojevich, the convicted governor of Illinois, because he's become a Trump supporter. We have him pardoning Eric Davis, the mayor of New York, who's has been convicted or is in the process of being convicted of bribery. We've got a president who's acting totally unilaterally based on his own self-interest, and he's doing it openly and notoriously. And apparently that allows him to get away with it. And I think what we have to worry about is the fact that our government is moving from a system of important processes that protect us to a unilateral control by an individual in which there is no process whatsoever. And no process is the end of our experiment.
Sandy, so if in all the phone calls and conversations we had this morning, and when we had conservatives call and tried to have an open dialogue with them, for the most part, it was, we don't want to have that conversation. We want to talk about you guys have been in control for all these years. And so that's where it ends up.
Well, I'm reading a text message from obviously a conservative who says democracy equals Democrats always getting their way. That misses the whole thrust of this conversation, which is I'm not now talking about what the outcome of the policy is. I'm simply talking about the procedure utilized to adopt the policy and the importance of having procedures in place that abide by the Constitution. And if we lose that, then we have lost something that is very important. And the conservatives who might be happy about the policies that are getting implemented in this ends justify the means kind of a process will be very unhappy if the ends that start justifying the means are the democratic policies that get implemented in the same manner. That's the reason we have this process, because it is nonpartisan. It is protective of everyone and everyone's interest.
So Sandy, so that's again the real fear. And as I stated to you earlier, my real fear is that Republicans know this. The people who are making these things happen know that there's another side of the coin, and that coin will flip. But they don't plan on. They want a two-headed coin. And so they want to make sure that the other side, even if it flips, is going to still be them in power.
Well, yes, and that was my conclusion after reading the Project 2025 manual, was that this system that they want to put in place, in which the president's and the White House power is supreme, and that all regulations and rules would get thrown out the window, except those that are consistent with the incoming president's views, is a system that can't work unless a president is a president for much longer than 4 or 8 years. And so, implicit in this concept of the very powerful president is essentially an autocracy.
Hey, Sandy, we got to run, man. Thank you for an inspiring and great show. Thank all of you, the listening audience. Could not do it without you. You are the reason that we keep moving forward. Thank you, Cardi. I look forward to working with you. Up next, Jane Madnair, Greg Bott, Madnair on air. See you guys tomorrow.
Teach your children well. Their father's hell did slowly go by, and feed them on your